And welcome to a new episode of the Dynasty Mind. My name is Chris Chung. This is a feature of Fake Pigskin. Tonight I am joined by Bob Lung of Big Guy Fantasy Sports. Bob, how are you doing?
Doing great. Thanks for having me on. Always a fun time to go anywhere and talk fantasy football with anyone. And so, thank you for having me, and thanks for reaching out on the Twitter.
Absolutely. It was fantastic to see when you posted this guide, and I wanted to know more about it. And then you posted about wanting to share more about it. I was like, I have to have Bob on the show. Bob, I know you're a friend of some of our other members on the Fake Pigskin channel. I know Dave Cherney, who's connected
Yes.
with me. He was actually my so-called mentor. He got me
Oh,
into the
cool.
industry, and I'm really, really happy to see the connections continue to be strong. So it's really great to have someone with your background in fantasy football to kind of describe your process tonight and talk about your guide as well. So tell me a little bit about yourself, what your flavor of fantasy football is, and how you get into this industry, and where are you right now?
Well, I started playing fantasy football in 1985. For you kids at home, that's before the internet. There was a gentleman named, I think it's pronounced Charpentier, Dave Charpentier or Chris Charpentier, wrote a little book, and it was like not a very big paperback, and it was just called Playing Fantasy Football. My buddy picked it up at a bookstore. That's where they sell books, in a store, not on Amazon. And he read this book, gave it to me. I read it, and he said, "We should start a league." And I said, "Absolutely." And since I'm a CPA and I'm an accountant by day, I was the only one that had access to Lotus 123
Oh my God.
for that dates me at all. And so I created this little spreadsheet. I won't call it an Excel spreadsheet because it was not Excel. And that was our scoring sheet for the week. We'd had our rosters on it, our teams, and we did touchdown only because, God forbid, we would have done something like PPR or something. And of course, I had to take all of the stats straight out of the USA Today paper on Monday morning and Tuesday morning. I would mail out the 12 envelopes every Wednesday so they could get them by Friday. And then on Sunday morning, they would call my answer machine at my house, loaded up to the gills with all the rosters for the week, and which always excited my wife when we came home from church. And there was it. That was our fantasy, the way we did fantasy football until obviously Yahoo came along, and it's involved to this day. And I'm proud to say that we still have that same league. It was called the Hall of Fame Football League because we live in Canton, Ohio, and we would hold our drafts at the Hall of Fame.
Awesome.
And so it still exists today, and I'm proud to say that 8 out of the original 12 members are still in it. We still play touchdown only. We do use the internet, but so that's how it all started.
Oh
And
my
then
God.
the whole writing thing and the consistency thing came from that league. In 2002, I had Shine Alexander on my team. He was the league MVP that year. He rushed for 15 touchdowns. And my team was the highest scoring team in the league, and yet I didn't make the playoffs. I was 7-7 in the 14 games. And I was just dumbfounded. I'm like, how in the hell can I have the most points of anybody in this league? I have the league MVP, and I go 7-7. So being the bean counter that I am, I broke down the logs of kind of the games and was looking things up. And I went, wait a minute. Geez, Alexander scored 5 touchdowns in one game on a Monday night, scored 2 to 3 touchdowns in 2 other games. So he scored most of his touchdown in 3 games. The rest of the games, he scored me nothing. I'm like, damn, if he'd have scored 1 touchdown every week for the season, I would have won 2 more games, and I'd have made the playoffs, and I would have won the league. And that's where consistency came from. And I'm like, well, maybe I have something here. So I just started, kind of crunching data with Excel and then Visual Basics. My brother-in-law knew Visual Basics, so we created a program from that. And long story short, it all evolved into where I'm at today, which is an online consistency report. You can put in your own scoring method on the Big Guy Fantasy Sports website, and it'll tell you how consistent the players are in your scoring method based on the number of teams in your league. And now you can see it live and see which guys can help you. The book kind of came about from reading fantasy magazines every year. And I've been in a number of fantasy magazines writing an article about consistency. But I always said, man, it would be cool if you took those profiles of those players, but added some consistency data to it to kind of enhance kind of identify those who are more consistent than they are, during the season than they are at just scoring points. But I really couldn't seem to get anybody to buy into that concept. So I wrote my own. And so 3 years later now, the 2018 guide is out. Last year, I was really just honored and blessed to, find out that I was a finalist for Fantasy Book of the Year by the Fantasy Sports Writers of America, named as a finalist. Didn't win, but hey, losing to Bob Harris and Football Diehards, that's okay. They're kind of a little bit better than I am. And so I'm good friends with Bob Harris. So, he congratulated me and I congratulated him. And, he said, well, maybe you'll get me next year. But it was the #1 seller on Amazon for a number of weeks last year. It was also named by Cheat Sheet War Room. They do an independent magazine review of all magazines written and picked mine as the best last year as well. So it just blew up last year. And so I'm really excited to get going this year. And that's kind of the whole story. And that's why we're here today.
Awesome. I mean, I really appreciate walking us down the line of the days when touchdown-only leagues existed. People probably don't know about them.
Right.
I've had a taste of that because my first league was a grandfather that, I finally got myself into that league with a lot of older members, and they were still scoring touchdowns by 5 points because it was easy to calculate on paper. It's
Right.
great to hear that, you are a finalist, and that is a high honor. I mean, a finalist losing to Bob Harris is really, there's no shame in that.
No, not at all.
Honestly, I think you're just getting better, and it's showing that people appreciate your work, people really value your work, and it has a positive impact for their fantasy experience. And I hope maybe you'll win this year, not having that Sean Alexander, being a great through the season, and then
Right.
the finalist. I'm excited to talk about your guide today. So walk us through your process. I mean, you'd already kind of introduced us to this idea where it started, how you got to it. So can you explain to us then what were some of the factors that you found that were important in looking at consistency?
Well, I think the thing that's most important in when you're doing this is showing those guys that are that extreme factor in really helping people understand. So my perfect example from last year was Cam Newton. Cam Newton ended the year the 4th highest scoring quarterback of the year. So when most people will pick up a fantasy football magazine and they see, hey, look, Cam Newton was the 4th best, quarterback last year, I should draft him in as one of my top quarterbacks. But yet, if you look at the consistency side of that, you'll see that he was actually under 50% consistent. That means more than half the games, he didn't help your team as a QB1. I mean, that's kind of how it works. When they earn a clutch game, it is basically on average, they're scoring enough points to be ranked in the top 12 quarterbacks or 14, or depending on your league size. And then, top 24 running backs, top 36 wide receivers, and then top 12 tight ends. Now, sometimes there's 18 quarterbacks in a week that earn a clutch game, and some weeks there's 10. But the average is supposed to be 12, and that's what the factor all comes into play at. But, it's identifying guys and trying to show people who have been frustrated, like I was in 2002, that they do really well and they score a lot of points, and then they don't make the playoffs. And then they get mad. Why? I'm the most unluckiest person in the league. Well, you might have had some bad luck involved, but maybe you drafted Cam Newton. Maybe you drafted, Devontae Freeman. There could be guys that you draft and you think, wow, on paper it looked great. But at the end of the year, their consistency was not up to par. And those guys held your team back when you thought, you should have been killing it and you weren't. So it's identifying those guys and then identifying the players that are kind of undervalued, like a Jarvis Landry every year. He's always one of the most consistent wide receivers in the league, and yet he's always like wide receiver 15 or 16 in rankings every year. Why? He's top 5 consistency all the time. Now, granted, he went to the Browns, so I know a lot of people are kind of like, I don't know. He's in Cleveland now, but let's be honest. Last year, he's 94% consistent with Jay Cutler as your quarterback and Devontae Parker as your second guy, your second wide receiver. Now you got at least Tyrod Taylor and Josh Gordon. That, to me, is an upgrade. So not saying that Jarvis Landry is going to hit 94% consistency, but I'm going to be drafting him as my wide receiver too. And if I get the usual, even a decent 75% or 80, that's not too bad for for a guy like that. But a lot of people will go, oh, he's with the Browns, or he's not that good, or he's not that this, and he's not that. But he's always been very consistent. So those are the kind of guys. That's what is fun to me, is identifying those players, watching them come through for people, helping people improve, their fantasy teams every year. The ones that I always enjoy getting the emails from is the guys who are like, Bob, help me. I just can't do very good in fantasy football. I'm always like in the bottom, and I just don't get it, and I just don't understand. And I'll give them the book. I'll say, here, use the tier draft list at the end of the thing. I'll send you the Excel version of it. You can use it for your drafts. It's a one-pager. It's very simple. Just follow the guidelines. It'll help you through your draft. And then from then, read the articles, keep up with the consistency, who's getting hot, who's consistently not. And then, try it out. It's $20 for the whole VIP package for the year. If you don't do any better, then we tried, but at least give it a shot. And most of the time I get an email say, Bob, I made the playoffs. Bob, I won my league. Bob, heck, this one guy said he went undefeated last year. He goes, Bob, I just couldn't lose. He goes, it was incredible. He had Todd Gurley and all the guys that I told him about. And he's like, Bob, he goes, I can't wait to get your book. I was undefeated last year. I won the whole league. And I'm like, wow, even I can't do that.
They put the process, they put your process, they put your work and made it successful, and that's always,
and that's what makes it worth it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely, and I can't wait to kind of dig in. Let's preview a little bit of your book, let the audience kind of get a little feel for it. We see here this is a very clean cover. It is very well done, and as you can see here, over 175 players profiled. You have added some new things to it: standard league analysis, X consistency, and total consistency value. Maybe you can talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so last year, at the end of the year, after the season was over, all the subscribers to the website, I sent an email out to them, and I said, guys, give me some thoughts, give me some constructive criticism. What would you like to see new, different, whatever the case may be? And a few people said, hey, I'm in standard leagues, only in standard leagues, and all your stuff's based on PPR. And I'm like, okay, good point. And luckily, about that same time, one of my writers, Josh Brickner, said that he only played in standard leagues. And I go, I got a job for you. And so he took all the numbers and broke it down for standard leagues. And basically, in the articles, takes the PPR and then shows which players went up or down in consistency based on that. And the obvious are there. Duke Johnson obviously went down. Those pass catching running backs lose a couple clutch games there, and their consistency goes down in a standard league. But that's what people asked for it, so that's what we put out there. The X consistency was kind of my new way of taking the simple clutch rate or consistency rate and kind of adding a little factor in it to kind of separate some of those players that look a little even. They both might be 67% consistent. What it does, it's kind of like XERA in baseball. It's kind of taking, the consistency number, multiplying it times the games played, or the fantasy points per game times the percent of games played, so that it gives a more truer factor of kind of analyzing it out. And so it showed people like Deshaun Watson would have been the number one quarterback by far last year over Rodgers. Just identify some guys who might have missed a few games, where they would be at an annualized basis. So that was something I added, kind of an advanced analytic for those who are used to the consistency and wanted something a little bit more to chew on. That's what I added that for. And then the total consistency value is just more of a outbreak of that as well. So just some new things to keep it fresh.
Yeah, these are tools that people don't usually think about. They always, as you mentioned, a lot of people think about their end of year results and then look at those stats and how they rank their player, and they're missing a lot of context. And this guide, what I'm hearing, is bringing in a lot of context. And yes, we think we care about you guys who still play in Standard League. I know that's not too long ago when Standard League was the main sports that's being played, but today I know PPR is a lot, but you are giving it to both groups who enjoy the points per receptions and those who still enjoy the old school stuff. So let's look at the table of contents. You have a lot of stuff packed in here. We can look back to the 2017 years and what we can bring to the 2018 years. You broke them down by positions, and you even added a DFS section for those who enjoy the daily fantasy sports aspect of it. I'm sure this consistency um, formula will help, especially in that kind of format kind of game. Tell us, what is the one thing that you're most proud of this year for your magazine?
Well, I think the one thing that I'm most proud of this year probably is the X consistency, because it does give people something a little bit different to look at. It allows to kind of drill down a little bit deeper for those players, especially when they're close. You look at two quarterbacks and they have similar consistency, similar numbers, but maybe one guy played, three less games, and now you annualize it out, you can see that they definitely are, a little bit better and might have a little more consistency in that. But, the whole book every year is really my baby, because this is, what I work, I start basically writing this book from the moment the season ends, because I don't do anything with profiles on rookies. So I don't necessarily have to wait to the NFL draft to do anything. So I usually have 80% of the book done by the NFL draft, fine tune it in the month of May, and then have it out for June 1st, so that, for the people who, want to go on vacation, they're sitting on the beach and, the wife's reading her romance novel. Now, the guy can take his fantasy football consistency guide, sit there in his chair and read this in June, and then, come to the website, get all the updates in July and August, and he'll be ready to go for the fantasy season, or her.
Yeah. Wow, this is actually excellent summer reading. We're only 3 short months away from actual football, fantasy football being played and scored, unless you're in the DFS, then you can play preseason as well. Let's look at the last thing. I'm thinking the tight end. I'm going to show people your work. It looks very well organized. You're looking at a 3-year window, and it's very helpful to break it down. Give a little bit of preview. What are people reading into these numbers, and what are they getting from you?
Right. So as you can see, it looks very similar to your typical profile you would see in a fantasy football magazine. There's a little bit of a blurb there that I'll usually write about the player, that they changed teams, or, maybe a new rookie came in, or whatever the case may be. The 3-year is your typical stuff you'd see in a fantasy magazine. But as you'll notice, it's all about the consistency, the fantasy points scored, where they rank there, the number of clutch games versus number of game played, which gives you your clutch rate or consistency rate, and then that ranking based on consistency in addition to. So that's where you'll see, like you said, guys that you might see be ranked 4th in total points, but 15th in consistency. You go, that's a guy I should be concerned about. Another one that I think is also a very important one, well, actually both sections are, but the games, quality games per week. So what this does is kind of shows, of the 6 clutch games that they played, where they earned them at, what weeks. Now you can see Eric Ebron, he stinks, but but let's say it was somebody like Kenyon Drake, who last year, like over the last 9 games, went 7 of 9 for clutch games. So you can see, his second half, for the year, it looks like Kenyon Drake was like 50% consistent, because he was like 8 of 16. But he did 7 out of those 8 over the last 9 games. So that kind of will pop up there, and you can see that highlight of, that, and I'll identify it probably in the blurb or somewhere, but then you can see where those games are played and where they might have been hot in the first half, second half, or whatever the case may be. The third section is kind of one of those unique things that I've had for a long time that I really enjoy too. And that is basically breaking the consistency down by home versus away. And then splitting that down into when they're playing at home against top 10 defenses, bottom 10 defenses, or in between, we call them the average defenses. So you can see like a tight end here, like, Ebron was very heavily relied upon on the road against bad defenses, and his consistency was actually 75%. That's where you can kind of help you in your DFS games. Now, again, Ebron's changed teams. He's going to be a backup for the Colts, so that's not going to be a good one going forward. But a really great example is when you get a chance, take a look at the home-away splits for Ben Roethlisberger. At home, he's like 90% consistent. On the road, he's like 45%. So basically, you look and go, hey, if Ben's playing at home, I probably should play him in my DFS cash game because he's really consistent at home. So that's kind of stuff that will show you to use during the season. So it's not a book that you just have it for draft time and toss it away because you're done. You can use this all the way through the season when you're kind of making that decision between two guys matchup wise and see how their consistency would play out. So that's kind of what the profile does. And then there's a section there that shows where I have them ranked on the tier draft list, and whether I feel that they're overvalued or undervalued based on their current ADP, and why I think they're under or overvalued. So you can see both Ebron and Eifert are overvalued because everybody still thinks Eifert is alive, and I don't think he is. I don't think he has been for years.
He might be alive. His knee, not so much.
Yeah, exactly.
This is fantastic. It's very well organized. It's concise, so people are not like bombarded with just full of numbers that they don't know how to make sense. You already help them interpret it, and these are cold hard facts. You can't argue like, because I felt like he would have been better at home or away. You actually have these broken down, have statistical backings, and definitely something that can be used for DFS. I know I will definitely enjoy this. A lot of the things that you put in here, I know that I thought about it, but I never had like the numbers to back it up. But now I can actually see that. So that's really helpful.
I've heard that a lot of times.
Yeah.
I've always thought this was important, but I never had it this well documented. I'm like, okay, good.
I'll drop a little spoiler as well. When you wrote about Jared Cook, I completely agreed with you about his profile. Oh my gosh.
Oh, Jared Cook. Have you ever seen The League?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The show The League. Do you remember the show where I can't remember what the lawyer runs into Antonio Gates and he's all mad at him because he lost the game for him? That's what I would do if I saw Jared Cook, because I would have won the Fantasy League of Experts last year if he would have caught that if he wouldn't have pushed off in the end zone against Dallas in week 15, and after then he caught the touchdown and they ruled it incomplete because he pushed off. If he doesn't push off and catches the touchdown, I make it to the playoffs and I win. Yeah. So I don't like Jared Cook either.
Very, very true. Sorry, Jared, if you're watching this, I doubt that you would be interested in fantasy. Okay, so but segueing into that, I know where I'm looking into to grab the most from your guide. What would you suggest for your readers how they can get the most from your guide, and not just looking at the rankings, at the tier numbers, and then, like you said, put it aside after this summer?
Right. Well, I'll assume that probably 90% of the world, probably 99% of the world, fantasy world, has never really even utilized or thought about consistency other than the same way you said. You thought about it, you kind of remember, you think it's important, you've heard about it, but you've never really read about it or got this kind of information. And with those people, I just say, start from the beginning and go from beginning to end. If you're just buying the book for rankings, you're buying it for the wrong reason. This book is something that it's a process that you want to learn. It's the old saying of, give the man a fish or teach him to fish. This book is here to teach you to fish, and then watch for that consistency in players. You can use the website to track the information for you, but watch, notice when you see a guy, wow, that's 2 weeks in a row that that guy has done really well, or that's 3 weeks in a row that he's caught a touchdown pass. Oh, so there's some consistency there. So that's the kind of stuff that I want people to kind of, like I have now, it's ingrained in me, and I can do it off the top of my head. But for people that this is new to, read the, about the terms, read the introductions, read why some of the numbers are what the numbers are, and then use that as part of your fantasy draft arsenal. I always say I'm the French fries to the Happy Meal here. You can go to the big sites like, Football Diehards and Fantasy Alarm and all of my buddies out there. Go to their sites. They have everything you need. But then get the order of fries from Big Guy Fantasy Sports and add some consistency to that. And then you now have a very good arsenal to go into your drafts and into your season. And you should be pretty successful most of the time. My goal every year, people was like, well, how many championships do you win? How many titles do you win? And I go, that's not my goal every year. My goal every year is to make the playoffs in every league I'm in. Now I was in 23 leagues last year. I made the playoffs in 16.
Wow.
Now people are like, well, that's great. I'm like, no, actually, that's one of my worst years. I've actually been in the 80 percentile of making it because that's my goal. Now, I may not win all the championships, but you can't win a championship if you don't make the playoffs. So if you're missing by 1 or 2 games every year because you're a little bit less consistent in some of the players you're getting, that's what I'm here to help you, because then you have a chance. You can't win a championship if you don't make the playoffs, and that's what this is about, is getting some consistency to your teams so that you do win those extra 1 or 2 games that get you over the edge, to get you in the playoffs. Then you have the chance to win. If you don't, that's fine, and it's not always a guarantee, but you got to get there.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think this fits well into the Dynasty mind, even though you probably had it for the redraft and the DFS kind of format. Dynasty is all about having a process, and having that process will help you year to year. And this will be an absolutely fantastic tool to add to your arsenal. It will help you better in making better decision makings in your draft, in your waiver wire pickup, in your trades. Right. All of those you can definitely add to this, and you will spot these factors before your league mate does, who does not have this guide. We don't blame you if you don't want to share it with your league mates, but we still want you to, support Bob, help others out, promote his work. Bob, thank you so much tonight. It's been wonderful. I really enjoy learning from you. Tell people where they can find your work, where they can find this guide, and what other things you have in store for us.
Great. So like you said, the website is bigguyfantasysports.com, and you can go there. Now you can, if you like the printed book, if you have to have the printed book, go to Amazon and you can buy it there on Amazon. If you buy it there on Amazon and then you come back to the website and you go, Bob, I want the VIP package because it gives you everything. Now you would get the book and you would get access to the PDF, but it says right in the introduction of the book on Amazon that for only $10, just email me the receipt and I'll give you a code. And for only $10 more, you can have the VIP package. So you get all the updates, all the Excel files, access to the consistency report, all the articles all year round. And it's only basically $10 more. Most you're ever going to spend is $20. And that's why I do that. I wanted to keep it reasonably priced for everybody so that, I'd rather give, kind of help share this information and not make it horribly expensive. If you're okay with the PDF version, you don't want the printed, and you like having it on your computer and that kind of stuff, then just come to the website, get the VIP package, or you can just buy the guide for $8.99. But for $19.99, you can get the whole deal for all season. And it's right there on Big Guy Fantasy Sports site. And you can email me anytime at bob@BigGuyFantasySports. It's in the book. I'll help you out. I've been chatting with some people all day who are asking questions like, hey, how do I use it here? How do I do this? And that's all available as well. On Twitter, you can find me, and Chris has graciously put my Twitter handle right on there, but it's at Bob_Lung. And just looking forward to helping people out, kind of just bringing consistency into their lives and their fantasy football lives, and just trying to help them out. So, Chris, thank you again for having me. It's been a pleasure, and looking forward to helping all your folks. And like you said, I'd love to help them out with their consistency.
Thank you so much for coming, Bob. I will be putting all the information that you just shared in the description of the YouTube video. You can find it down there below in the link. Thank you so much for hanging out with me tonight, and I hope that you will win your championship this year in all 23 leagues, or how many ever you are in.
Yeah, as I said, I think it's already going up. I think I'm already going to be closer to 30, but that's fine. It's all fun.
All right, thank you, and have a great night, Bob.
All right, thanks, Chris.